He's listening to every word I'm saying.
Okay, let's see. All right, folks, there we go.
We're
Technical
back.
difficulties. I do not know what the problem is with my internet or computer, but we're back. Armand Rosamilia was telling us about his latest releases. So if you could continue with that.
There's a lot of them. So I don't know if you got First Coast Thriller series is my crime thriller series. January 15th, February 15th, March 15th. The first three were released. And I'm doing great with those. I have a bunch of books coming out. Again, I've done 6 books with Southard Press so far. The 7th one, which is San Miguel's Treasure, should be out any day now. I'm not sure when. And I just got a lot of a lot of stuff
So you're
constantly
just
coming out.
a writing/publishing machine.
Yeah, some stuff is self-published. A lot of stuff is with publishers, and so that's why a lot of stuff drops in, at the same time. Unfortunately, I can't control that. Like I'm in a Evil Cookie Press. They're counting bodies like counting sheep or whatever. The Splatterpunk anthology that just came out. I think it dropped a couple days ago as well. So it's like within 7 days, I had like 3 books released, which is a nightmare to promote.
Right.
You have all that, and then I might go a month or 2 months without anything coming out.
Well, A Month of Duncan is something very different.
Yes.
And so when did that come out?
That came out November, I want to say.
Okay, so it was a bit of
So recent, yeah. I originally wrote it in October of 2019. So for the month of October, I went to a different Dunkin' Donuts every day, sometimes 2, sometimes 3. And I ordered a different drink or a different food item every day. So it had to be something different every day, a different Dunkin' Donuts and a different item that I would eat. And I would talk to people or try to talk to people, which is very hard for me. I'm actually very introverted and I don't like crowds. I don't like being around people. So it was really, for me, it was a challenge to just talk to a stranger. And there were certain things like we went to a convention in Georgia and Jay Wilburn was there as well. So me and Jay went to the local Dunkin' there and I talked to him, and I had other people, friends and family and whatnot. I interviewed my daughter who was going to college at the time. So there was a lot of those, but then there was a lot of really interesting conversations with just random people that were just coming in to get a cup of coffee. So that was a lot of fun, and I did a lot of my writing there on those days as well. And as a full-time author, I'm home 90% of the time. I never leave the house. So the challenge every day was to get up and get dressed, put some pants on, and actually go and drive somewhere. And down here, there's a lot of Dunkins. It's not like the Northeast where every corner there's a Dunkin'. In fact, I think in the book we talked. We were back in New Jersey for some book signings, and we stop at a Dunkin', and my wife says, "Is there literally another Dunkin' Donuts across the street?" And I said, "Yeah, but it's the highway, so you got to come." And she's like, "Seriously?" And I said, "Yeah, and look at the line in both of these." I said, "Obviously they can do that." And so that was fun. Like we went all the way up to Massachusetts and back, and we hit every day we'd hit a different Dunkin' Donuts up and back as I did some book signings and stuff. So it was a lot of fun. Definitely different. I've done other nonfiction books before, but this one was a lot of fun, and I spent a lot of money on coffee and picked up. I'm like, oh my god, these apple fritters are delicious. Oh my god, this chicken sandwich is delicious. So it was funny to eat or drink certain things, and it was October, so I had to do all the pumpkin,
of course,
things. You had to do all that stuff. So it was a lot of fun.
Were there any anecdotes or stories or anything that didn't make it into the book for any reason?
Some of the negative stuff, obviously. So in the beginning, when I got the idea, I had actually emailed Duncan, and I said, "Look, I want to do this book and everything else." And they said fine. They sent me basically write up a letter of intent kind of thing. And obviously, they didn't come right out and say it, but obviously you don't want to go, oh, and this one was garbage, and oh, I got sick from this. You want a positive book. There weren't that many negatives. A couple of negatives were they never had enough staff in some of them, which I kind of touched on in one of them. There was like one guy in the building running around doing everything, and but otherwise everything was great. I mean, there were some people that were nosy that would try to get behind me to see what I was writing because I had my laptop out and I'm drinking a cup of coffee, but otherwise it was good. The problem was I did it in October of 2019. I already had a publisher set up and ready to go. So when I gave them the book, I heard nothing for over a year. And it was because they were still putting books out, but they weren't doing as many. Obviously, everybody didn't know what was going on. Right. And so I finally said, you know what, I'm just gonna put this out myself. I think it needs to be released, and before you get any further. So I actually kind of wrote I guess a new ending to it of, hey, I wrote this. Yeah, no one's wearing masks in this because we didn't need to. This is before COVID, even though it's coming out 2 years into COVID now. So
right. Is this something you could turn into a series, a month of Burger King or a month of Starbucks?
I joked around about that with my wife, and she's like, "Yeah, you're not doing all that." But I don't. You know what? For me, Dunkin', it's something that I love. It's as cheesy as it sounds. There's things that I really like, and Dunkin' is one of those things that I'm trying to think. I probably got about 15 free beverages in the year doing it, and I think it averages like every 2.5 days I was going to Dunkin' over the course of the year. So even just with that month was obviously every day, but I'm going outside of that as well, where I'm not really. I don't love Burger King or McDonald's, or I'm definitely not a Starbucks fan. So I don't love these other places enough to go, you know what, I'm going to get out and I'm going to go to Wendy's every day for 30 days, But it was fun. It was fun while I did it. I learned a lot about me. I learned a lot about my threshold for being around people and being able to just, basically look at somebody and not be creepy. And I mean, there were times where I was in there, there would be like a woman with 2 young kids, and I'm like, all right, don't look at her, don't talk to her, because I don't want to come across as like a creeper, like, I'm looking at your daughter or something weird like that, And so it was a lot of anytime I talked to somebody afterwards, I was like exhausted because I was like, I just talked to a stranger, which I don't like to do. It was a weird concept for me, and even all the way to getting all the way to Halloween and doing the last day of it. It still wasn't 100% comfortable doing.
Mm-hmm. All right. Excuse me again. All right. Now, when I introduced you at the beginning of this, I called you a podcast czar. So how does one become a podcast czar?
By doing a lot of podcasts. I started in radio. Years ago, I was on an AM station, which became an FM station, and I did that for a number of years. And then I was doing Friday nights, so it was me and another author on a Friday night from like 7 to 8. We were doing writers. It was Friday Night Writes. The two of us were interviewing authors, or if anybody would come down to the station, or we were just talking about what we were doing in writing. And then he would do an hour show of like deep cuts from classic rock things, and I would sit in with him, kind of engineer for him, and then he would engineer for me, and I would do like from like 9 o'clock to midnight. I was doing a heavy metal show. So at midnight, I'm leaving there, and I'm driving an hour and a half home, and then I started getting night blindness. It started freaking me out, and actually, I would go on the way home. I would always stop at a Dunkin' in St. Augustine and the guy there said, I'm the only person there. It's like, 1 o'clock in the morning, I pull up to the drive-thru, and the guy all of a sudden, after like 2 or 3 Friday nights, he said, cinnamon raisin bagel with cream cheese and a large Britney Spears. And I pulled up, I said, what's a large Britney Spears? He said, light and sweet. And I said, oh, okay. So I use that. So I actually use that in my fiction as well, if characters go to Dunkin' as well. And that was kind of where the Britney Spears thing came from this random guy. And it just got to the point where I started recording the shows not live anymore. I was recording like a 3-hour show with the commercials, with all the music in it, and then just uploading it to the system, and it would automatically go. And it just wasn't as fun, because obviously people can't message me on Twitter or on Facebook or someone go, hey, can you play this song, or do you have this song or that song? And so I stopped doing it. And plus the station wanted me to do like, okay, play all the hits from Poison and Bon Jovi and Cinderella, and stop playing anything heavier, and stop playing stuff the songs that nobody's ever heard, kind of thing. And I was like, yeah. So at that point, I started being interviewed on podcasts, and I was like, you know what, I can do this. I'll interview. So in 4th of July 2014, I started Armcast Podcast, and that went till July 4th, 2021, last year, 400 episodes. And I was like, you know what, it's perfect. It's like 7 years on the dot, and it's 400 episodes, perfect. And I stopped it because it's a lot of work. But then also I was doing Armcast. I was doing the Mondo Method podcast, me and Chuck, talking about writing and publishing. I had done a baseball podcast for a little while, helping out when that was starting. And I own Project Entertainment Network, which had, at one point, I think we had like 30 different podcasts in the network. And we had the Horror Show with Brian Keene. We had Three Guys with Beards. We had the Liars Coming. We had a lot of big authors that were part of the network at one point. And that was a lot of work, and it was a lot of money too. And so as that started to fade away, I said, you know what, I need to concentrate on the writing more and not all this. So I ended Armcast. I stopped doing the baseball one, and I just kept the one podcast. And while technically I'm still Project Entertainment Network, we don't really work all together anymore. Everybody kind of went their own way. And a lot of the podcasts, as you know, I mean, they just, fade away, or people move into other things. And Brian ended his show, and Mary San Giovanni had a show. She ended hers. Kelly Owen had a show. She ended hers. Three Guys with Beards ended their show. So we had a lot of guys that people that just kind of went their own way, which was cool. But I loved it. I love doing it. I think I'm always gonna want to do a podcast because I enjoy that. I enjoy talking. We do once a month. We do on the Mondo Method. We do author roundtable. So last month we had Robert J. Sawyer was on, and Ace Antonio Hall were on. And those are both award-winning authors. So it was cool to be able to pick their brains about, hey, tell me about the time you won a Hugo Award. Tell me about the time you won a Stoker Award. That's fun. And it's fun this is fun just to talk to another, you get to chat. And I love hearing myself talk, as my wife says. So it's a lot of fun. So podcasting will always be something I think that I'm going to do.
Nice. Very nice. Yeah, I love this. I was on a couple, they called them radio shows. I don't know why they were radio shows, not podcasts. Got fired from one and wasn't able to do the other one because of time things. But yeah, I love being able to talk to people. Yeah. And as we're about to get to our main event here, one of the things I love about doing this show is when people pick their favorite horror thing that they want to talk about. A lot of it, people are picking things that I already love, and I get to revisit something that I absolutely adore. And then some people pick something I have not read or have not seen, and it turns out to be just fantastic.
Right.
and we're going to get to that. But before we do, I have one final question, I guess, which is when I asked you about to choose something for your favorite horror, you said you're not really big on watching horror films.
I am not a horror movie fan. I mean, I grew up on all the I grew up on Halloween and Freddy, and I grew up on Friday the 13th. I loved all of those schlocky 80s blood-sucking freaks and Chud and all that. I mean, I saw all those, and I just, as I got older, I was like, there's nothing new here for me, and I would rather read horror than watch horror. So now, saying that, over the last 6 or 7 months, author J.C. Walsh and I, because he's a huge horror movie fan. I mean, like, he's like, he has so much knowledge on every movie. And he had said, "Oh, you got to I don't even remember what the movie was. You got to watch this movie. I think you'll like it because it's not a slasher movie. It's not blood and guts. It's kind of a, it really makes you think." So I said, "All right, let me watch it." So I think it was The Lighthouse, I think, was the first one. Okay, so there's 2 movies that are called The Lighthouse. And then he said, "Oh, there's other movies that have a lighthouse in it." And he loves cosmic horror, and I'm a huge cosmic horror fan. So we picked 4 movies with lighthouses, horror movies with lighthouses, and we actually did a 45-minute episode on my YouTube channel talking about them. And so we've done it like every month. We've picked, last month we did post-apocalyptic, we've done zombie movies, we've done cosmic horror movies, we've done westerns, so I've watched way more horror movies in the last 6 months or 8 months than I have in 20 years. And some of them I like, and some of them I'm like, this is great. But he knows not to I'm not going to watch Saw or Hostel or Human Centipede. I'm not watching any of those. But I do enjoy I enjoy a movie that makes you think. I think we're doing like dark thrillers coming up. So he'll pick 4 movies that I've never seen, and I'll watch them. And usually he loves them. And usually I'm like, that was all right. All right, I'll give you that one, kind of thing. So when you originally said horror movies or books, I said, okay, what book am I picking? Like, what's the first book that pops into my head that I think would be interesting to talk about, as opposed to let's talk about a horror movie that I haven't seen in forever and won't revisit.
Well, most people pick movies, which is good for me because it's much easier for me to prepare, because
Right.
I can take 2 hours and watch a movie.
Right, as opposed to hours and hours of reading a book.
A few people have chosen books, and most of them I had already read. This might be the first one that I had not read before. Because Summer Cannon chose a book movie pairing, which was Jaws.
Nice.
And I had just read Jaws for the first time a year or 2 ago. Nice. And someone else picked Interview with the Vampire, which I read decades ago and didn't have the time to reread it. So I told them, kind of like I told you, you might have had to be the person to really talk about it. And it was Mark Allen Gunnels. I was like, you may have to do most of the talking. I do not remember a lot about the book.
Yeah. Mark likes to talk, so that was good.
Yeah. But so we're going to get to the main event here, since we're tiptoeing around it. And folks, I'm going to introduce you to what this book is, but there's going to be spoilers, because we're going to dig into this. We're going to talk about it. So if you have not read this book, pause this video, go read the book, come back and watch the rest of the video. But your choice for my favorite horror was Tender is the Flesh by...
I also have a copy.
Can you tell us the author's name? Because I don't want to butcher it.
Augustina Bazterrica.
That's about how I would have said it, I think. Yeah. And translated by Sarah Moses.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, you chose this. I immediately bought a copy and read it And I have to thank you. This was amazing.
Yeah.
Absolutely fantastic. So, can you give us a quick little synopsis of what this book is?
I think the quick synopsis is it's like the near future, and the government has told us that animal meat is spoiled. We can no longer eat any meat. So they've devised a system that we can eat human flesh. So all the butchers and all the great chefs and all that are beside themselves. They can create all these delicious, human flesh treats. And there are just like, there's slaughterhouses. So our main character works with, a slaughterhouse in his area, and it's slaughterhouse is for humans. And it's I love that they talk about the cutting, the preparing of the flesh, as if you're sitting and you're in a place and they're cutting up a pig or a cow or something. I mean, it is so, they're not looking at it like this is a person,
Right.
And
it's
and
illegal to call them that.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's really what makes it really cool. And the character himself understands this, but then there are a lot of other hints in here that is this really what's going on?
Right.
And I think that was the brilliant part was, spoiler, we don't really have to believe our government on everything. There's another reason here, maybe. We don't know or not, but there's stuff going on, like his his ex or whoever his family, they walk around with umbrellas because the birds are going to kill them and everything. And he's like, the birds have never attacked anybody. There's at the farm, there's birds that are flying around and sitting on the trees and everything. Like, a lot of people are overreacting, and they're listening to what the government is saying to keep everybody in fear of all the animals and everything else. And it's a really intense book.
I thought it was, I called it in my review, I called it beautiful horror.
Yeah.
Because I think the writing is amazing. And just the general idea of it is horrific.
Yeah.
Industrialized cannibalism.
Yeah. The concept is horrific, and the way it is written makes it even worse. Because this easily could have been somebody who goes, "No, we can't do this. This isn't right," and they're just fighting against everything. There's your book. It's kind of like the Southern greenest people, and then it's not that. It's the guy understands this is the way life is. I mean, I don't agree with everything, but
I was going to say it's like Soylent Green if everybody knows and accepts that Soylent Green is people.
Right, yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, basically we follow Marcos. Marcos.
Yeah, Marcos
is the guy. We're basically just following him through his day-to-day life. Which is, again, part of what makes it horrific is that this is just his day-to-day life.
Yeah.
And we do get those. I like that she does follow show, not tell. She doesn't just inundate us with what's happening at these slaughterhouses or processing plants. We're getting it through his POV.
Right.
He has to go to these different places. And so when he goes to the slaughterhouse, it's the place where they breed the head, as they call them, I think.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And there's a German investor there, and so the owner of this place is taking the German investor on a tour. Has to work with Marcos, has to deal with Marcos. So he's like, Marcos, come along. And so we're learning all of this through this tour that's happening naturally as opposed to her just telling us this is what happens.
Right. And it's set up like it would be an investor coming in and wants to buy cattle. You're in
Exactly.
you're in Wyoming and you're selling a head of cattle. I mean, that's there's no horror for these people. This is life. This is the way this works. Like you said, they're not human. These people are not human anymore. That they're selling in and then they're going to eat.
Yeah, we're told they're not allowed to be called human. They're not allowed to be called people. There are certain rules now. It's illegal to basically look at them as human.
Yeah.
They are simply meat. And all because allegedly, and I'm going to ask you about this, allegedly animals started carrying a virus that was fatal to humans.
Right.
Just a bite or a scratch. So basically, animals became illegal. They're hunted down, destroyed. And I like that it was like the cannibalism started off as secret. Certain people were doing it.
Right.
And then it just became the way of the world.
Yeah.
Now, do you think that the animals actually became deadly?
No.
Or do you think it was the government controlling?
I think it's population control from the government. The government said there's too many people, and we're gonna chop this down so we can manage this. And there's a lot of hints. There's a lot of read between when you're going through, and I love the fact that Marco is disinterested in a lot of that stuff. Like when his sister's saying stuff, he just blows her. Oh, that's not.
Yeah.
That's not. And I love that part, that he's not this political activist. He's not trying to dig in. You don't ever get to that in the book. You know what I mean? That's it. All of that is beside the point once you realize at the end what he's actually doing. And I think that was really brilliant, because it could have gone to the author standing on a soapbox and shouting about oppressive government and all this other stuff. They don't. She lets you as the reader go, are the animals really, can we really eat the animals? And we've wiped out all of the animals, and now we're eating one another, and it's the population control. That's when I read this, I say that's exactly what it is.
Well, excuse me. Marcos keeps going to the zoo, the empty zoo,
right,
and has his memories. And then I think it's a great scene when he finds the puppies.
Yeah.
Beautiful scene. But his world as I said, we're just sort of following him around on his day to day, and his world sort of gets turned on its head when this guy gifts him a female meat.
Right.
And she's first generation pure, which I think is a big thing.
Yeah.
Because it really gets into the different cuts of meat and the different quality of meat,
the breeding and all the other, as if you're looking at cattle, you're looking at swine, you're looking at horses. I mean, it's the same. I would imagine the author, she had to do a lot of research on all of that, because there's so much of that. And it's not overbearing. It really adds to the story on all that stuff. But I think it's and I guess his wife is not home.
Right.
His wife is away, and there's problems with him and his wife. Which we see a lot of. That's more important to Marcos than his day to day. He's got a job like everybody else. He's going to work.
Well, now, as I said, we're gonna be spoiling stuff, so we can go right ahead and say, I'll go ahead and say it. He and his wife had a child who died.
Right. And
so she's off she's gone to stay with her mother, trying to deal with the grief of losing a child. So he gets this female human cattle, and again, it's so simple and so natural in their world. The guy that gave it to him was just like, hey, you can breed it, you can sell it, you can let it sit for a few days, and we'll have a big barbecue.
Right. Yeah.
And it's just, it's not written in a way to startle you. And yet it does.
Yeah.
But it's written so matter of factly because that's the way this world is.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the beauty of her writing in this book. And so we see Marcos he starts to become, I think, disenfranchised with everything. And people notice, people are asking him, are you okay?
Yeah.
And he's fine, whatever. He's trying to figure out what to do with this female. Until he does something with the female that could get him in a lot of trouble.
Yeah.
But we meet, his father is in a home, and I don't know if that's why he keeps his job, or if he just keeps his job because it's a job, but it is important. He needs to make money to keep his father in this home.
Yeah.
But
I don't know if he's necessarily like in love with this job, or it's just it's a job. It's money, and he does his job well.
Yes,
he knows the job. He's almost bored with the job.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a day to day. It's he reacts instead of acts all through his life. It's just, hey, come over. Hey, you're gonna take a walk with me and this investor. Okay. Hey, you're gonna go pick up this head. Okay. He's just constantly doing things because this is part of what else am I going to do? Even when he has the woman, and that becomes a focus for him, he's still kind of walking with his eyes closed through the rest of his life. It's the only thing has him, and he's nervous, he's worried. It's the only thing that like makes him human, is he's worried, what am I doing? He knows he's doing it wrong. He's doing something wrong. And I get the feeling too, like he's not all that concerned that his wife isn't there.
Well, I think that's something that changes, because at the beginning of the book, she's not ready to talk to him.
Yeah.
And he's trying to talk to her. He'll call and he'll get his mother-in-law.
Right. But I think it's more of him going through the motions, like his day to day. For me, reading that, I think towards the end, he starts to actually think about his wife and what the repercussions are of having this other female in the house that he's doing stuff with.
See, I took it as him trying to reconnect with her at the beginning.
Right. But then he goes through the rest. He goes through the rest of the book
to avoid her.
Yeah.
And then at the end, well, he needs her at the end.
Yeah.
And then his sister, who seems to be, she's all about appearances.
Yeah.
And everything. I wouldn't be close to my sister if she were like that either.
No, or the her bratty kids.
Yeah. And she's worried about those birds.
Yeah. That I liked. I liked that. I liked those scenes with this, even though I could not stand the scene. I was like, really, oh good, please eat her at the end here, kind of thing. But I also looked and I was like, how freaked out she was about everything, and how disinterested he is on really anything she was talking about. He just wanted to get away from her, and he saw, oh my God, you're raising these little monsters.
Yes.
And I thought that was interesting. And it's that they're doing all of this now, and then you have a next generation of this, which is just going to perpetuate this, because now you're so far into 2 or 3 generations later, this is the way it's always been, and we eat these people are food now, and we're there might be pictures and things of dogs and cats and lions and bears and whatnot, but none of those things are going to exist or probably exist at this moment right now.
Yeah, that's going to be us the way we are with dinosaurs.
Right. Yeah.
And there is still a class system because you have the scavengers.
Yeah.
Who are the sort of almost feral, it seems. They're never described as having homes or anything. They're outside the processing plant trying to get meat.
Right.
And then the big thing that happens at the end that we'll get to, and then you have them, the poor and disenfranchised that have become these sort of barbaric scavengers. And then you have at the other end, you've got the guy that has the hunt going on.
Right. Yeah.
And he can buy head and set them loose on this preserve, and people go out and hunt them. And they generally don't like females unless they're pregnant, because the pregnant ones will fight to survive. And then he has the whole thing where if somebody's in debt, they can work off their debt by going out and being hunted, if they can survive a certain amount of time.
Yeah.
And then they get the rock star. Yeah. He only had 5 hours left. 5 hours left on his debt, but he's killed, and the one guy gets to eat his dick because that's like the big special thing.
Yeah.
And it's all served up. And as you said, chefs have found ways to make these amazing dishes and presentations with human parts.
Yeah.
So I enjoyed that there was this class system. I mean, it's kind of, it emphasizes the way the world is still.
Yeah. And I think that was, whether she wrote it on purpose or not, she's given definitely a reflection of the times today, the times when she sat down and wrote this book, and our future. What is all this? What is going to be the cost of humanity? Basically, is what she's saying, and she's saying we're going to eat people. We're going to get down to the nitty gritty here. I like the scavengers. Because you don't, like you said, you don't, they're disenfranchised, they're feral, you get that. But then you also read between the lines, like they're not as, like in every cheesy 80s post-apocalyptic thing where they're dressed in rags and they grunt and they fight one another and they're chewing on old dog bones and stuff. They're not those people. They're desperate people.
Yes.
But they haven't lost their humanity, and they understand what's going on more than the upper classes do at this point. And I think that was also a refreshing take on them as well. And again, the book could have easily have been where they overpower and they take back the world kind of thing, or some crap like that, or they have the proof that you can still eat cattle and things like that. But we didn't have any of that. We didn't need any of that in this book. You know what I mean? We really needed to focus on our main character and what he was doing. And that's why I think it's brilliant. You could write, this could be a series. You could write 10 more books on it. But I think it would lose something if you had to explain the world to the reader. I think you and I have kind of the same take on it, but there's also some stuff that you've read into it and I've read into it. And I think that's what really makes this work, because every reader you could talk to about this book would go, well, maybe, or, you don't know. They never say yes or no about animals, or you can still eat them or not.
Yeah, I agree. There are stories that I've read where I want more. Someone's created a world and I'm like, I would love to see more things from this world. I actually just said that about V. Castro, her Rewind or Die novella, Hairspray and Switchblades.
Okay.
She creates this world, and I would love to see more of that. This book, I don't think I want more.
Right.
I think this is all you need. and it doesn't explain everything, but you don't need everything explained.
Right.
And I do think it's not that, and this is the only thing I've read by this author. And maybe if she did something else set in this world, it would be amazing, but I don't think we need that.
No.
And it's unfortunately possible that it could lessen the impact of this and sort of cheapen the world. I don't know if that makes sense.
And that's the way I feel about it too. I feel like you don't need any more in this world. You've given us everything we need is in this book, and the rest of it is in your head, which is a great place for a reader, because you're not begging for more. We haven't ended this on a cliffhanger. We've wrapped up all of the plot, all of the subplots, everything else that needs to be wrapped up.
Mm-hmm.
We don't need to find it. We're hoping that his sister gets attacked by birds. We're hoping that she becomes food. You know what I mean? But you're not going to see any of that. I think that would cheapen what we're doing if you wrapped up all those little threads a little too nicely.
Now, this reminded me in feel of Gina Rinaldi's Mother Puncher.
Okay.
I don't know if you're familiar with that book.
I am familiar with it, yeah.
Simply because in that book, we're following sort of a blue-collar character. This particular book takes place over, well, at least 9 months. We know. Whereas I believe Mother Puncher is like a single day. But it is this sort of near future. There's overpopulation, and we're following this blue-collar guy who happens to be a mother puncher through his day, but we're also seeing that there's protests and
Right.
this world, and she doesn't over-explain things and leaves it open. And so I got the same kind of feeling.
I could definitely see that, yeah.
And then the way this ends, so we have, and again, spoilers, folks, go read the book. The savages, whatever they call them, I forgot already. They overturn a truck of head and grab a bunch. They kill the driver. They eat a bunch of cattle, and our main character, who for me, for the past 9 months, we'll say, has seemed very disenfranchised, very tired of everything.
Yeah.
He's just going through the motions, but now they need to come up with a solution because these poor people, the scavengers, that's what they were called. The scavengers obviously now are becoming more proactive when it comes to getting meat, and he just, without even blinking, it seems to me, he's like, just poison them.
Yeah.
Doesn't think twice about it, doesn't seem to have a crisis of conscience about it. It's just, this is the solution. This is the best way to deal with this problem. When we give them meat, we put poison in it. Some of them will die. The other ones will learn they can't eat the meat.
Yeah. And I think that's a great foreshadowing for the end of the book.
Mm-hmm.
I think when you get to the end, for me, I immediately thought of that. I immediately thought of he's been reacting through 80% of this book, and now all of a sudden he is proactive, and he's proactive in a way you're not expecting him to be. At that point, you're expecting him to go, well, they're people too, and he has this big, his conscience and all this. Like that's what you're waiting for. You're waiting for that big network TV. He's the smartest and holiest man in the world, and he's going to save these people. And then he's basically like, screw them, let's kill all of them. And you're like, wow, that's powerful.
Yeah. And then the very ending of it, and I don't know if we're gonna give all of it away, but hopefully this will be clear. I was reminded of Henry Portrait of a Serial Killer. Because in that movie, you know, we have Michael Rooker's character, Henry, sadistic, psychotic serial killer. But then he falls in love with his roommate's, his friend's sister.
Mm-hmm.
And when the guy tries to rape his own sister, spoilers for Henry Portrait of a Serial Killer, people. Henry kills him, and he goes off with the woman, and you feel, all right, so now he's in love with this woman. He's
Right.
wants a relationship. Maybe she'll tame the beast. And then what is one of the greatest endings, I think, and it's so subtle. They drive off. They're leaving town. They stop at a hotel for the night, and then we cut to the next morning. Henry's driving down the road, pulls off to the side, and just puts 2 suitcases out on the side of the road, which we know is what he does with his victims. And it's like he couldn't, you know, you can't, a leopard can't change their spots.
Yeah.
He might have thought he was in love. He might have been in love in whatever capacity he was capable of, but he still ends up killing her and leaving her on the side of the road. And I got that feeling with the end of this book.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
You're not expecting it, but when you look back on it, it's the only thing that makes sense. It's the scorpion and the frog, you know.
Right. I love that.
And that's pretty much it. You're not going to change anything. Which is fun. Which I'm in Jacksonville, which is where a lot of Otis and Henry started out down here too. So there's a lot of history in places over here, which is funny. I remember seeing that movie, but yeah, I can definitely see that too. You, as a reader, you don't want the ending to happen, but you know, any other way you do it kind of cheapens the whole book.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you do it any other way and they all live happily ever after, or anything like that happens, or he's fighting for this woman's freedom, or any of that stuff, you're like, you know, I wouldn't have liked that ending.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, I love the ending. I think it's fantastic. Yeah. But that was the feeling I got, because it seems like he's having, through a certain section, having this, if not crisis of conscience, at least internal struggle about what he's doing with his life.
Right.
And then at the end, it's just, that was just a little bit of ennui.
Yeah.
Now, I'm going to get back to the real world.
Yeah.
Was the feeling that I... Yeah. Now, my question is, how are he and his... major spoiler here, people.
You got to read. I mean, at this point, they're either going to read it or they're not, you know?
How are he and his wife going to explain the baby?
You know, I think it's one of those where, again, he's back to reacting. So I think it's one of those, his wife is just happy that there's something for her to love. There's something in there. And I think he honestly believes, we're not worrying about that. We're doing like one thing at a time. Is now we're back together, and now we're a family again.
Yes.
And also, unless they're you know, they go out and do stuff, you know, unless they're going out, it could easily be the wife has been gone for a while. You know, the wife could have easily been. Well, the wife was pregnant when she was gone. She came back, and she had this baby. You know, and you get that feeling that her family, her side, would go along with it because they're going to support her in any way.
Right.
You know, so I think it's interesting that I think they got away with it. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And I think he goes back to being the 9-to-5 schlub that he's been all this time. And the wife is happy. That wife has finally got what she wanted, which makes it nice for him because the wife's not on him. The wife's going to stay. This is keeping his wife at home. And that's it. And I love his whole, that turn of his attitude at the end there, of just this woman who I've had for 9 months, I've taken care of, and I've cleaned, and I've talked to, and I've done all these things. Basically, in the end, you're just meat. You're you're not important. You're a means to an end. And I don't think he realized at the time, obviously, what the end would be. But it's kind of like, well, I make the best of this, and this really worked out for me without me having to do anything for it, which makes him an awful person, except in this world.
Right. The previous 9 months in this world, it's the previous 9 months that made him an awful person.
Right. Yeah.
And I liked that they had to keep sending people out to verify that he had the meat.
Yeah.
Or whether or not he sold it or cooked it already, or because they have to keep track.
Yep.
Got to keep track of that meat.
Yep. Yeah, I loved it. I actually got this from the publisher. And when I first got it in, I read it, and I'm like, oh, I'm not gonna read this. This is awful splatterpunk ridiculous, and I don't read really extreme. And I was like, let me try it. And it hooks you from the beginning. I mean, it hooks you with the descriptions and stuff are not in your face. They're just, again, it's just like you go to a butcher shop and you want to give me a pound of ham and a pound of salami kind of thing. The way it's so matter of fact. And I think that was so engrossing in the beginning. I just blew through this. And when you were like, pick a book, I was like, you know what, I read 100 books a year, and a lot of them, about half of them are horror books. But this is the one that still, months later, still sticks with me. It's still the one that I'm like thinking about. And I'm thinking about that, I'm thinking about that world. As a writer, I'm envious, I'm jealous that you can create a book this good.
Yeah, I'm so glad you picked this. It was on my Amazon wish list for a long time, because I'd seen it mentioned somewhere else, and I use my Amazon wish list basically as a reminder list.
Right. Yeah.
I throw things up there, and then I'll go back and look. Oh yeah, that book. I wanted to pick that up at some point, or that book. It's finally out now, so I can get that. So it had been on my radar, but I had not picked it up. But man, I'm so glad you suggested this.
And I'm glad you read it and liked it. That was
absolutely loved it. I have no doubt this will be on my top 10 for the year.
Yeah.
So do you have any final thoughts? Any final things you want to say about the book?
I love this. It's one of it was one of my top books, if not the top book from last year. Out of, I think I read 81 books. I do the Goodreads book challenge every year. I read 81 books last year, and I think this was easily my the top book. And I read some really great books last year. But if you said to me, "What did you read last year?" This is what I remember.
All right. So anything you want to plug for yourself?
No, just check out my stuff, ArmandRosamilia.com. I write live 3 days a week on Twitch, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Usually a short story for like an upcoming anthology or something, and I answer and go back and forth with people in the chat. It's really an excuse for me to 3 days a week to hang out with people and stuff. So check me out. Just follow Armand Rosamilia on Twitch, and on Twitter, I'm Armand Author. I'm on there all the time. That's about it.
All right. Well, I'll throw some links up in the description below for people. And you answered the next question I was going to ask, which was where people can find you. And apparently you put out a book a week, so people need to keep up with all of that.
Yeah.
All right. So folks, there you go. Thank you to Armand Rosamilia for coming in and chatting with us about all sorts of stuff.
Yeah.
And if you folks have any comments or questions, put them in the comments below. Please like, share, and subscribe, all that YouTube stuff. That's it for me. So until next time, folks, read more books. And